Hello, and welcome to the Ascendant Art Podcast, where we are on a search for art that is ascending above the mainstream into something truly great. I am Mike with Catalytic Comics, your host, and next up we've got Joey, Slender Dad, author of Keeper's Cairn, and Vinny Adriance, author of The Little Chad Comics. How's it going, guys?
It's going pretty
going
good.
Nice. So tonight we've got a discussion about gaming, some of the crazy politics going on in it, and Joey has gone off and done some really great research for us for some current topics. So Joey, I know you had a bet last time about who's going to get canceled next.
Yes, I did.
Tell us some more about that, because it looks like it's been a week and you've won already.
So we were betting on who they were going to go after next in Hollywood as far as who they were going to try and cancel. And since we were in the Marvel universe, I put my money on Star-Lord. As most people know, Star-Lord is played by Chris Pratt. And not even a week later, they're trying to cancel Chris Pratt.
To be fair, I thought I had at least until Jurassic World's next sequel or Guardians 3 came out. I did not see the Mario curveball coming. So congrats to you for anticipating the most out of left field casting for Mario in an animated movie I've ever seen, which is Chris Pratt to do the voice of Mario the plumber of Super Mario Brothers. Didn't see it coming, so yeah. Joey, that one's for you.
I swear I didn't know. I really didn't.
and didn't you mention earlier that Chris Pratt voices some of the other characters in there too?
No. The guy who voices Mario in other media prior to this, he also voices Luigi, Waluigi, and Wario. So
he's pretty much the entire plumber lineup and their evil versions as well.
Pretty much.
Yep. Charles Martinet, met him at a couple cons. He's funny. He's a good guy. He'll do voice recordings to your loved ones if you'd like. I got a nice Mother's Day shout out to my wife a few years back, and it's very funny, very nice guy. So a little disappointed. Hopefully they're going to give him some kind of part he can do in the movie, because it would be wrong if they didn't let him do something, since he's been Mario's voice, that it's a Mario, for the last 25, 30 years.
I mean, hopefully if nothing else, just at the beginning they can have him pop in and go, "Here we go," and then be done with it.
Or maybe that, if I'm not just anticipating if they could do depending on how meta they get, a nice gag where you have 8-bit Mario show up somehow, with the 3D voice. Yeah, and then have him speaking in Martinet's voice, and it's just kind of a gag who are you? I'm a you. To me, of course, growing up, my first version of Mario that I saw was Captain Lou Albano from the Mario Brothers Super Power Hour. If anybody else remembers.
You mean the Super Mario Brothers Super Show?
Oh man, I just remember that.
Yeah, with it also had a really awesome Zelda cartoon that has no bearing at all to the continuity of the games.
Nope.
But is rather entertaining, where Link was just on an epic quest to try to, get with Princess Zelda.
Link was a dude, bro, in that cartoon. He just
and not to mention, I think the origin of at least a few memes came out of that too.
It was a really funny show. I mean, the production value could have been a lot better, but I mean, that was the golden era of Nintendo cartoons. You had Captain N the Game Master. You had the Mario Brothers one, which led into the Mario Brothers 3 cartoon, Super Mario World. And then it all went to hell when the Mario Brothers movie came out. Oh, the debacle. That was the first one.
I think it's the first
case of the live adaptation that just ruins all the cartoons.
I gotta say, even though it was a weird effing movie and it had very little to do with Super Mario Brothers, I still liked it. On its own, I liked it.
Bob Hoskins as Mario was actually not bad. And then John Leguizamo as Luigi wasn't bad. Dennis Hopper as a evil politician, human evolved lizard man Koopa was a little where it kind of went south. And then the Goombas, being lizards instead of mushroomy things, that seemed weird.
Yeah,
but you know what, honest, for as what they were doing, if you ever watched the background on the production of that movie and how epically nightmarish it was, where they were just writing the script on a daily basis and changing it every day, it was actually one that came out better than the production should have meant it to. still weird and just kind of a fun
I was
watch.
gonna say that sounds like Troll 2 levels of changes to the script. Like you're just handed your script 15 minutes before it's time to film.
That's about right. I think Bob Hoskins was like, I'll never make one of these movies again after that. I mean, this is a guy who was coming off Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was one of the most successful movies like of all time at that point, and still holds
Yes,
up and
indeed.
is very good. Anybody, that's high recommendation right there for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the original, not the like new PC detective
Where they're
Jessica
gonna take all
Rabbit.
the fun out of it.
Yeah, or that, she wasn't bad. She was just drawn that way. I mean, that she was
Right.
that was said in the comments.
That was a major driver of that character as well, that she has to constantly prove herself.
Well, and she was supposed to be the classic dame from a detective noir, like that's what.
Oh, and she was a femme fatale. That she
Yeah.
even had like the hair, the hair covering in the one eye, and
And the makeup and
the
everything was like that. And she's trying to convince he's like, no, like that's not who I really am. I'm just drawn this way.
What is really interesting about that movie, and that will never, ever, 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 ever happen again, was the fact that you got the Looney Tunes characters and the Disney characters in the same movie at the same time, like sharing screen time. Like you had Donald fighting with Daffy, Bugs Bunny talking with Mickey. I mean, that stuff is never going to, the way they protect IP now on a corporate level. And it was because both studios were kind of in a place where Warner Brothers really didn't care about their animated stuff, and Disney was not quite in its renaissance, so they were actually like desperate to like make deals and try to do new things to rebound. That was the Eisner era. And so I think that that's one of the most fun things. If younger people who are listening have not watched that movie, it'll really trip you out to see like those characters like actually on the screen together. So totally worth it.
Because instead of using the IP first, it's like we're just gonna have fun with this.
Yeah, kind of as intended.
And it's a really kind of dark story where they're like acid drowning cartoons to kill them. I watched it I'm very familiar. I'd
Don't
watched
they
it the other
kill a
day.
shoe? Like
Yes, they take
murder
a
a shoe on screen?
yes, and it's a really happy like loves everybody kind of shoe cartoons. Like do. You want to talk about traumatizing? I was like 7 when I went and watched that in the movie theater.
I know.
It's like,
and then
oh
they
my
throw it
god.
into like the toxic waste.
Yeah, I mean, if I hadn't been like mentally scarred from Optimus dying like the year before, it would have been over.
Crazy, dude.
But all that leads back into the fact that I totally lost the bet because I did not see a new Mario animated movie with Chris Pratt coming in. And yes, they are launching one of their epic cancellation campaigns based. And I think I was reading some of the articles that were popping up that were shared in our background kind of meeting, where the silence is violence is the main attack line against Chris Pratt. Like it wasn't that he didn't come out and support the right people and that he was opposing, like he wasn't even actively opposing. It was just the fact that he didn't support anybody publicly. That was what needs to make him a target to be canceled.
And the line of attack on this one is kind of a little bit ubiquitous anyway, because they're either just saying he's a controversial Mario, or there's a lot of articles that are coming out that are saying it's just a miscast. And it's like, okay, why aren't any of you talking about Jack Black as Bowser?
I was gonna say, of all the miscasts, like I can't see him as acting that type of character.
But it's less about who they cast and more about who they cast. Like if it was anybody but Chris Pratt, I don't think anyone would have problems with it. Although apparently I looked just before we started this, and John Leguizamo has spoken up about it and says there's a serious lack of representation in this new movie. And it's like, you already fucked up Mario Brothers 1. Shut your fucking mouth.
Crazy. It's like, and by representation, I'm sure he means like, creativity and fun and stuff that like all viewers would enjoy, right? Or is he just going to go for virtue signaling again?
I think the attack on the representation is that the main cast is mostly not diverse. So therefore it lacks standing in current year Hollywood, even though they're playing animated characters that are nominally Caucasian or foreign from another dimension princesses or giant lizard things. Because I mean, Jack Black as Bowser, I suppose they could have gone But then you're like in the trap too. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because say they decided to cast minority voice actors in just like the Bowser roles, then it's like, well, of course, you're only casting minorities to play the villains. You bigot, you phobe, you person who doesn't care.
I think what it all really boils down to is if you didn't cast me, I'll find a reason to be pissed off about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that aspect to it, or there's also this aspect of and you can see this historically with witch hunts or with various other purges in history, and in one sense we're kind of fortunate that it's not as severe as some of the historical stuff you read about, which is incredibly horrific, but you see a lot of the same energy in the form of, hey, like, we haven't found any witches to burn this month, like, okay, like, let's just adjust the standards so we can find new ones. So the thing is, it's like, it doesn't matter if you like appease the mob this time, like they will come up with a new thing to be mad about.
Which is why it's interesting. If you look at it, if you just hold out for 24 to 48 hours and don't give in, they get bored that you're not giving them the oxygen, and they'll move on to the next thing where they can actually try to, get results. So if you watch these feeding frenzies go on, you can see that there's really about, maybe on the outside, a 36-hour cycle where if you just hold out long enough, they'll move on, and that maybe they might circle back again. But if you just hold out, they won't be able to take you out. And the main thing is just not acknowledging like what they're accusing you of, because there's no way to apologize and come out of it. Once you apologize, you've admitted your what
guilt.
you've done, and you must be. I mean, it's basically these people.
Now you are a witch.
Yeah. Well, they're Javert is what they really are. For like they're obsessed with Jean Valjean for stealing a loaf of bread. And they will epically pursue you as you're actually living a virtuous, amazing life, doing good things for an entire community. But by God, you made that one mistake once, and we will never let it go. And it's funny because I do think there's a good parallel to the whole French Revolution politics of it, because everybody who may have studied it and is familiar understands that eventually the French revolutionaries like ate themselves, and did, after the reign of terror, like everybody turned on each other. There was no real people's government that came about. It was just new oppressors oppressing in even worse ways. And so the people who are going after these things, the Javerts, if spoiler for Les Miserables, which is like 400-year-old story now, when he's confronted with the fact that Jean Valjean was a good person and was doing these things and then saved his life, he just committed suicide because he couldn't deal with the cognitive dissonance of trying to process that.
Wild. And speaking of controversies that you really do expect to blow over in 36 hours, I know next up on the agenda we're also talking about, apparently people are upset about a guy by the name of McCree in the Overwatch game. Joey, you want to tell us some more about that?
McCree. I don't know what this one's all about, to be honest. I know that Blizzard has had their shitstorm of problems over the last few months, starting with...
It's concealment and cover, Joey. If you've, it's like, so sometimes there's concealment and sometimes there's cover, and this is trying to be both to get out of what they're doing.
So here's what I know. Apparently there was a developer who was pretty heavily involved in Diablo by the name of Jesse McCree. As kind of an homage to him, back when they were first spinning up Overwatch, they named this character Jesse McCree. That particular developer has since been, booted off the moving train with so many others because sexism or frat boy behavior, kind of, shitty stuff. But I don't see why we got to go back and change a character's name.
I was going to say, if people didn't bring up the controversy, like, I wouldn't even know who this was.
It's a controversy. Like, it doesn't effing matter. Like, it's a good Western cowboy style name. It sounds good. Now I'm hearing that apparently they're thinking about changing his name to McLeod, and I'm like, you gonna ditch the poncho and the cowboy hat and start running around with a claymore and speaking like a Scot?
Well, it's that Outlander crowd is really into first-person shooters.
Oh yeah, all about it.
Can maybe they should get what's his name, from Highlander, get somebody from Belgium to do the voice of the Scottish Highlander Western gunslinger character.
I don't know. Calling Count Dankula.
Christopher Lambert for the win.
But like, and I think you're right. I think it's all smoke and mirrors. Like, oh well, we'll do this. We'll do this. We're doing all these stupid things. It's like these don't help. And here's the tough love part of this whole thing, right? Like, if the name is bothering you, you have more deep-seated emotional issues than can be fixed by changing a video game character's name.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, unless this person has like singularly done something so great that someone like me who is not an Overwatch player would be aware of it and like make a purchasing decision based on that, like maybe then.
Well, and we've lowered
Or
the
for that
bar so
matter-
much over the past few years with, you know, the Me Too's that have been happening. And it's like half the times we've determined either A, they're lies, or B, they weren't really what they said they were.
Right.
And so now it's like, I don't know what to believe anymore. So I usually just assume, okay, something bad happened. If he's fired, he's fired. Cool, move on.
Yeah. And further, I'm thinking the other part, if you do this, like, again, like, why are you announcing this for virtue signal points? Again, it's like, I'm like, the thing I'm still struggling here is to understand, like, why does this need to be news? I just feel like there's got to be other more newsworthy things that they can do for these game updates. So, but yeah, but apparently, I mean, that's apparently what the news is. So,
Can
just
we
have
also
to
just
run with
take
that.
into account the fact that the Venn diagram of overlap on Overwatch players and people who give a rat's ass about this guy's name change is probably like so minuscule, if it even exists, that I have no idea why, from a business standpoint, you've spent all this money on branding and creating a character and IP. There was Overwatch like merch and all those other things. You're not going to change any minds. You're not going to get the player base that you have doesn't care. And in fact, maybe even wants it to stay. Why change things?
So that they can then spend some more money telling everybody about how virtuous they are.
Maybe so. I'm thinking now you got me on one rant I'm thinking about in particular, but it was one job I had held earlier on, right when I was like just getting started in my particular field, and it was a pretty decent sized company, you know, a few thousand people in that company, and I remember at one point, people were explaining to me, it's like, oh, hey, like they're letting the old CEO go because he basically boned a decision that lost the company many millions of dollars, and there's going to be layoffs, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good for me to know. You know, I'll be sure to keep my resume fresh. And then they lay off 75% of HR, but then all of a sudden they come and say, hey guys, everything's going to be great. We've got a woman CEO. I'm like, oh, good. Like, does she have experience turning companies around?
Yeah, what
It's like,
are her
no, actually-
credentials?
No, actually, her history is fixing failing companies by doing mass layoffs. I'm like, oh, that's great.
Oh, so it's Carly Fiorina?
No, it was
I was
not
gonna
Carly
say, so she
Fiorina.
doesn't fix the company, she liquefies the company and makes
To
sure
get
that
it
all
ready
the
for
people.
sale to another company.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
I had the group liquidated. They were insolent.
Yeah, and then I remember in my case, because I was doing automation stuff at the time, they like pulled me into this room and they're like, hey Mike, we need you to lead this like one sales automation project. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool, tell me more about it. And they're like, oh, by the way, we're gonna lay off 90% of the sales department after this completes. And I just remember like I'm walking through the sales department, walk back out, I'm like, okay, my resume is going out, I do not want to be here for this. But again, it was just I
Oh
just
yeah,
remember,
that'd turn you into public enemy number one.
yeah, tell me about it, dude. Like I was just like, I don't know. There were just so many issues there, but I just remember though when everyone was starting to like really like the company was starting to get woke, and they were just saying like because the CEO is female, everything's going to be great. I'm like, what is she going to do? Because right, like I really don't care about the gender of the CEO, or in the case of these games, the characters is like, what are they going to do? And this always seems to be absent from these discussions. So just you guys reminded me of that just now.
And just to continue on that, I've noticed that when companies have these problems nowadays, they go into these tailspins where it's almost like they make it worse. Like the plane's going down. Oh shit, we got to fix this. Somebody ripped the wing off. Because like it used to be, even back when I was, still serving in the military, it was like we used what was called the informal resolution system, or IRS. If something happened and it shouldn't be happening, you resolved it at the lowest possible level. If you were incapable of resolving it at that level, then you would escalate to the next level and the next and the next and the next. But nowadays, it's exactly the opposite. It's like, I'm not taking this to my supervisor. I'm not taking this to the CEO. I am blasting this out to the whole fucking world first. And I get the distinct impression a lot of these, they start in the public sphere. And it's like, honestly, if that's how somebody on one of my teams handled it, they'd get fired. Like,
yeah,
I'm sorry this happened to you, but like, you made this situation so much worse for the company. You're hurting everyone as a result.
No, absolutely. And what's funny is, I mean, I do know like what ended up for that company in the end is, of course, I think they just got like what we called the India team to like do that project. And they did end up like laying off all the salespeople. My department, they laid off half the department, all the managers. And then I think probably about 6 months after that, because like I left, all that happened about 3 weeks after I left. And then I checked the company website and it then said, oh, we're now a USA Today company. So like basically they just cut everything and then sold it to this media company.
I mean, that's usually what they do in those situations. They start liquidating assets, and with whatever little value they still hold, they sell themselves off to the highest bidder.
Yeah, because that's what you do is you basically cut staff to nothing. You take what revenue you do have just before it craters, and the numbers look really good for about a quarter. And then, yeah, that's when you do the sale. But yeah, let's get back to the gaming though, because speaking of things that, speaking of different CEOs and mass layoffs and everything else, yeah, let's go to the John Gibson one. So you're telling me about the Tripwire CEO.
Oh yeah. So Tripwire. I actually just pulled this up. Maker of games like
inverse. This is an inverse of my story.
Yeah, maker of games like Killing Floor, The Ball, Dwarfs, and a bunch of other shit I've never played. I will honestly say I don't think I've ever played a Tripwire game. I guess they're good games. They seem to be doing well. They've made many DLCs and many games, and there's a Killing Floor too. So apparently the first Killing Floor was a success. But he apparently tweeted out an opinion that was not congruent with the message. But he tweeted out in support of, let's see here, the Texas SB 8, which bans all abortions after 6 weeks. I guess that pissed a lot of people off. And if you go to his Twitter, there are a lot of people talking about how they'll never buy Tripwire games again in response to this, and blah, blah, etc.
I wonder how many of those people bought Tripwire games to begin with.
Yeah, some of them claim they have, and it's like, okay, great. If you really like the game, you're still going to buy the game. But here's where my problem comes in with the whole thing. And that's Tripwire then made an announcement, and they said the comments given by John Gibson are of his own opinion and do not reflect those of Tripwire Interactive as a company. That should have been the end of the fucking statement, as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is your CEO. He's clearly steered you right so far because the company has, had moderate success in one of the most competitive markets on the planet right now. But no, they continued. They talked about some more stuff, and then they said, effective immediately, John Gibson has stepped down as CEO of Tripwire Interactive. Co-founding member of and current vice president Alan Wilson will take over as interim CEO. And it's like, really? Like, is the guy not allowed to have an opinion? I mean, I know this is a hot issue, but I disagree with some of my friends on this, and we're still friends.
I was going to say it's because maybe it would like, they were planning to release like Killing Floor 3 in like a Planned Parenthood clinic.
Yeah, now with babies.
I think South Park already covered that in Stick of Truth when you had to actually go into the abortion clinic as one of the missions and abort zombie baby Hitler. It was very complicated, but funny, terrible, bad all at the same time. But what's interesting is to go to another like pop culture instance of this is like Gina Carano and some of the things. It's clearly not that you're tweeting political things. It's what side of the policy that you're tweeting in support of that gets you in trouble. And
I'm sure if he'd have tweeted the other way, he'd still be CEO.
He would have been stunning and brave and won awards. And he would have I'm sure Game Informer would have had Neil Druckmann presenting him with like a special lifetime achievement award to, go on with Big Appy Pump from Last of Us 2.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm doing some research for some of my villain characters to help understand their philosophy. And part of that, I was reading Antonio Gramsci. And for those who don't know, that's the Italian communist who came up with the concept of culture war and is very much the intellectual father of what we're going through right now. And it's interesting because that was one of the things he did expound on a number of times in his writing, is that he pretty much says it's like once you get into these like various media sources, you cannot allow any disagreement at all. And he said especially the most important job for that is the editor. Like you cannot let anything against the agenda get through to the paper, because like his view pretty much was like what's getting pushed out there is right. That's what people are going to read. That's what they're going to think about and know. And especially the periodical media, the media that moves fastest was of the most importance for that.
I don't know. I just feel like, is the guy not entitled to express his opinion? Like,
well, apparently not.
Going in, just from a purely cynical business point of view, if the country is logistically fairly evenly divided, and that's kind of borne out by polling, vote tallies, et cetera, why would you then like what makes it so much better aside from getting the promotion and praise of the mainstream media, the idea of alienating one, like you're clearly going to alienate the other half of your audience. You're going to make people take a side by making a choice. Like if you let it go, you're probably not going to win over some of the media people, but you're probably, the people who wanted to buy that game would probably move on and still buy it. But what you did do by making the choice you did is alienate a lot of people who like would have probably been in the market for that specific type of game and did it. And I think a good example obviously is also Battlefield, where they ran into the same problem where they decided to retcon World War II to being like cyborg women soldiers. And when the guy
when they had the paraplegic woman on the front cover with her bionic arm and leg.
And when the developer was asked about it, he was like, well, if they don't like it, they can just not buy it. And then immediately pre-orders just tanked. And man, the damage control off of that one when they were trying to fix it in the next one, et cetera. I mean, you could almost see the COD guys like salivating at how like Battlefield was making good inroads against COD.
They were gaining. They were gaining pretty steadily.
Battlefield 1 was a legit great game. Like, and I played that one over that COD iteration at the same time, and it was a lot more fun. Like it was a little more difficult because you didn't have the modern weaponry and vehicles, but the gameplay was awesome. Destructible
the
environments.
The only issue I had with Battlefield 1 was there wasn't a lot of content, but the content that was there was top quality.
Oh, I actually really liked the vignette storytelling for the World War I style, where you actually played different parts of campaigns across the entire world, like being the Australian runner in the mission versus being in the Italian campaign in the mountains, where you're not following. The difference is, instead of a set campaign where you're one character doing the entire mission set, doing vignettes where you would take on the one role in a very compelling story. And by doing it that way, they could tell stories where those characters did die as a result of whatever was going on. So it was a little more impactful because you weren't sure which vignette you were doing, whether the person was going to get out or not, because they weren't going to be the next campaign story. They were just for that one spot, which was a lot different than COD, where until the last mission you're gonna survive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you had what was it, the tank commander one? I really liked the tank one.
Oh yeah, I mean they were all. I mean, if anyone goes back now, Battlefield 1 is the campaign it's actually not that long, and it's pretty good to play. I'm sure it's on Steam and you can go out there and do it. But playing, I would recommend that campaign because it's actually not a big time investment either. I would say that you're looking at maybe 6-7 hours of gameplay, which is tops. Which is, I think, what Joey was talking about, where the only complaint was that the content was a little lacking in terms of the story. Because normally for a AAA game, my rule of thumb is I want at least 12 plus hours of mainline story besides playing multiplayer. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you get games like Battlefront, where they just say screw it and have no campaign in the first game, and it was just all online play, which led to the second one, Battlefront 2, where they went with the another super woke kind of storytelling. And whatever, what are you going to do now? It is what it is. You can feel the pain. As Star Wars storytelling goes, that one is one of those ones where, like, some of the prequel moments becomes more palatable in retrospect when you see what else happened. So you're like, Battlefront 2 story wasn't great, but there's Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. So I'll take that one instead, please.
So before we move on, I will say, I think this is a first. We actually identified a piece of Ascendant art in Battlefield 1. Now, to continue on that, the only thing I will say is that to fix it, I would just say maybe after all the vignettes were done, there should have been some sort of a final vignette that was unlocked that took place on a much larger and grander scale, because that's the only problem I had with it, was because of the ups and downs of each vignette. It never felt like the story culminated in anything.
And especially if we're talking about like a reference to the World Wars, right? Like you do want to have.
Well, and I
something that
never
kinda,
got
like,
any of
leads up
the
to a
added on
conclusion.
content either. So if there was like further on DLC that did that, great. But I know it didn't come with the first game.
Yeah, so I had the full battle pack subscription, and it was really good. And you got a lot of extra content. And where Battlefield really shines and is something that other systems still haven't replicated very well and have pretty much abandoned it as a concept is just the massive actual map fighting, like where you're logistically fighting against a team of 64 other people with a map that is so epically large you have to get in vehicles to get to checkpoints timely if the team hasn't taken it yet. Some of the like there was one map, it was the Italy map, where you were in a mountain and you were having the possibility where you could take entrenched like artillery positions to just rain down massive artillery on the like lower levels of the map, and if whoever got that, you could just start destroying stuff. But then you'd have air power coming in to bomb you, and people storming in. It was hours of fun for me. I like the first person shooter genre. I've played it, gosh, going back all the way to like Star Wars Dark Forces, when it was that, one of the first person shooters on a console game. Doom. Yeah, Doom, Quake 2.
And of course, Quake 2, I remember very fond memories in high school because a very generous hacker hacked our like county school system and installed it on a server that you could reach from any computer in our school. So web design class it very quickly devolved into a Quake session every class.
So Quake 2, my story for Quake 2 was freshman year of college. We're on a dorm level with all the other guys on the level. And we're at school, so we finally get LAN, right? This is 1999, so this was our first like experience as teenagers with high speed internet. And I had a CD burner. I was the only guy on the floor who had one of those, and someone else on the floor had Quake 2. So I burned copies of it for everybody, and we all copied. I wrote the CD key right on the top of the burned copies of the disc. And what was great is a lot of people may not know this, but if you're running off the same CD key, like even in a LAN game, you can only have like 12 at the time. Quake 2 would only like allow 12 logins of that license. And so it would be a rush after class each day to try to log in so that you weren't the person left out of the license key so that you actually got to play. But it was great because everybody had their doors open, and instead of playing on mics, because no one had those, you would just be yelling at each other down the hall as you killed somebody. And my favorite thing to do was to, because Quake 2 was super moddable and you could download skins. So I would download a skin that looked like Kermit the Frog, because on the screen, Kermit was like about half the size of all the other characters. So what's interesting is that's what it looked like on the screen, but for your sprite, the actual like hit map, it's still the normal body zone. So when people would be trying to headshot Kermit the Frog, they'd be shooting me in the leg. So it was a great advantage that allowed me to get a lot of kills that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't cheating.
Hacks.
It's not a hack, because if they had aimed their cursor like an inch higher, they would have headshot me.
That is unethical gaming practice, my friend.
Well, blame Kermit. Just because I wasn't running around as like a Starscream or a Robotech Valkyrie.
I mean, it's not as bad as running around with like the skin that just makes you transparent so that you're basically,
invisible.
You're basically the predator at that point. I know
Right.
people did that, but it's still
That-
kind of bad.
So now that one's cheating, but mine was just smarter gameplay.
Uh-huh.
Smarter gameplay.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Sure.
It was fun.
Well, we went from characters that are too small to, I know next up on our agenda is about a character that's a little bit too big.
Little bit too big. Yeah, a little bit.
Mike, you are the king of transitions. Excellent. Excellent one right there.
I gotta be good at something here because I'm not good at games or comics. Even though I'm trying to like.
If you work really hard at home, you could cosplay as the new God of War Thor with very little investment. All you'd need to do is buy a lot of carbs and commit to probably about 3 to 4 weeks of the standard American diet. And
Pizza and cheeseburgers.
and you could be the new fat Thor that God of War is going to be rolling out in the sequel that they're working on right now.
By the way, I love the fact because as you know, like my wife's the dietitian and like we read on all the paleo stuff. I love the fact that standard American diet is abbreviated SAD. So like,
That's
just
actually
eat
perfect.
the SAD diet.
Yep.
You're
Yeah.
gonna turn into a fat loser.
Oh, that's so perfect.
Well, a couple of problems I have with this. I loved the last God of War that came out. Like I played it. I almost 100% it. I could never beat that final Valkyrie Queen because that bitch is just a pain. But everything else did and done and dusted. Got the secret ending where you sleep at the end after you've already defeated the final boss. And then in that secret ending, you get the little teaser where Thor shows up and they show him. And he's a little bit barrel chested, but like even under the armor and the cloak and everything, you can be like, okay, that is not a fat dude. That is a dude who is built like a brick shit house. And he's got a clean beard and clean hair. You can kind of see under the hood. He's got Mjolnir there, and there's just lightning and coming off of his hand and touching Mjolnir, and then it cuts out. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna be good. This Thor doesn't look anything like that Thor. Like his hair is greasy and disheveled. His beard looks like there's shit crawling around in it. And his stomach, although clean, looks like it's got some problems.
Do you
maybe
think
some,
they were
like,
inspired
metabolic
by
health issues?
Yeah. Do you think that they were going for the Marvel vibe specifically for this? Like
It wouldn't surprise me, although honestly, like he looks dirtier and more disheveled than Fat Thor from the Avengers. And I think I know exactly why they did it. Because if you go into the actual Norse lore, my wife is a huge expert on this, so she's always telling me about this stuff. But in a lot of instances, Thor did appear as a man with fiery red hair and a fiery beard. And it was described that he had an insatiable appetite for food, like him and Loki both, technically. That said, he was never described as fat and dumpy. He was always described as just a hulking, bear of a man just covered in muscle and sinew. So I'd love to see some of that in this giant fucking beer gut that's hanging out of his I don't wear armor because apparently I want to be more Spartan.
I don't know why, but like when you talk about a guy with no armor and really fat, I actually think back to one of the Bible stories out of the Book of Judges, where the hero assassinates a king who was like really, really fat. And it even mentions like the guy thrust the sword into him and the fat closes around the sword and he just like walks away and the king dies.
And here's the thing. I have zero problem with it if this is the way they want to go with Thor. Right. I will have a problem with it if he can fight against Kratos for more than 30 seconds before he gets winded.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like even if he's a god, there's still certain reality bending issues here, right?
Yeah, and if he's a god, why is he choosing to look like this? Like that looks more like Bacchus than Thor.
If they ask you if you're a god, Ray, the answer is yes.
And it's just such a huge letdown too, because in the first one, the main kind of antagonist throughout was Balder, right? And right. Balder was kind of like a skinny dude, like very like he didn't look weak, but he was very sinewy and like not built like Kratos, who is a big muscular kind of brick shit house kind of dude. But he didn't feel any pain, like never felt any pain when Kratos was beating the shit out of him. It's actually said very in their first encounter, he says, I feel nothing. And if you know the history behind Balder, Balder couldn't die because he was magically enchanted so that nothing could hurt him. Problem with that was, in the actual lore, Loki knew exactly what could hurt him. The only thing that could hurt him was mistletoe, and Loki set up a trick that ended up killing Balder. So, haha,
wasn't
fuck
that
you,
what set
Balder.
off Ragnarok too in the
It doesn't necessarily set off Ragnarok, but it was what sealed Loki's demise, because they tried to get Balder back, and they actually went to Hel in Niflheim and said, could you please let Balder come back, because he needs to come back to Asgard and be with his people and everything. And Hel said, if every Asgardian sheds a tear for him, I will release him. There was one that didn't. It was Loki.
that dick.
Loki was like, nah, fuck that dude. He was an asshole. And so that's why I believe Loki eventually got like tied up by his organs around the roots of the tree, and the snake drips its venom in his eyes forevermore and everything else. Like, Loki was punished for that.
It sounds like they didn't really have a path to redemption for Loki, but whatever, he kind of deserved it.
I don't think Loki was looking for redemption. The more I read it, the more I think Loki was actually the good guy, because if you read some of the Norse mythology, the Asgardians were fucking pricks. Like, they were assholes to everybody.
I was going to say, it's one of the interesting conceptions about theology, because right, a lot of people have the misunderstanding that, quote unquote, all religions are the same, or that they're trying to have all people be basically good. But yes, some mythologies were just pretty much just people who had a whole lot more power and had no problem abusing it too, right? We can,
and that's not to say they were bad all the time, but like, Loki existed as a foil to teach humility to some of the Asgardians when they were getting out of hand.
Yeah, and because it's a little bit different, it's a little bit different basis for kind of how that mythology is built, for sure.
But as far as going back to the original part of the story, which is Fat Thor, like, I was so hyped up seeing Thor at the end of the first one, because he was built more like Kratos. Like, he looked like someone who could go toe to toe with Kratos in a way that Balder kind of couldn't. Like, Balder, yeah, the fights were epic and they were cool and fun to watch, but at the end of the day, like, Balder up against Kratos, it was clear Kratos was the bigger and stronger combatant. So moving into this second one, which is supposed to end out the series, it's supposed to just be the 2 games, not a trilogy. But the second one is supposed to end out the arc, the Norse mythology arc. Yeah, Thor being the final confrontation would be like taking someone who's more on Kratos's level to go up against Kratos. And they just threw it out the window, because like, this dude doesn't look like he's on Kratos's level. This dude doesn't look like he's on any level other than the one that doesn't involve stairs and has burgers.
The level that doesn't involve stairs. Why am I thinking of, like, what is that from Doctor Who?
The TARDIS?
Yeah, not the TARDIS, but the
He's bigger on the inside.
Why can I not think of the names of these guys? Because
what are you thinking of?
The Daleks.
Daleks.
Oh, yeah,
because I remember there was actually one episode,
exterminate. Yeah.
Where like one of them were like legit stopped by a set of stairs. And then for once, they instead said elevate, so that he could apparently initiate some anti-gravity to get up the stairs. But like, it was this whole deal of like, he had to do all this work just to climb a set of stairs.
Yeah, I mean, the Daleks definitely had to have some work done to make them more imposing when they relaunched Doctor Who. And they did. They did a pretty good job of it. And then it all went to hell. And hopefully... fun fact, Russell T. Davies is apparently coming back to resurrect Doctor Who a second time after they destroyed it. So hopefully we'll see if he can do that. That'll be fun. I liked the show when he did it, so we'll see what happens.
No, absolutely. And but I was going to say, so in that case, Joey, what we can look forward to maybe is the plan for like Kratos to defeat Thor is we'll put them somewhere like China's Huashan, where like it's all stairs, and Thor's just gonna like have a heart attack, like chasing after him.
Maybe
that's the plan.
I mean, I'm still probably gonna play the game, but this guy doesn't seem like a match for Kratos.
And I'm wondering, so because what really intrigues me here is one is what was the decision? Because the thing is, right, like this character is going to appear, but somewhere there was a committee that decided this is what we got to do, right? And I'm wondering, like, what was the decision
Well,
making
somebody
process
made the
behind
call
it?
to change it.
Yeah,
That's the worst part. Like,
yeah.
this is not what he looked like. And I mean, I
And
guess
then
there
further
could
from a
be the
storytelling
argument that he
perspective,
got
yeah,
fat and dumpy because Kratos killed his kids, but he showed up at the end of the first game and did not look like this. His kids had been dead for at least a couple days at that point.
yeah, and further, usually that's like when the dad like starts working out more because he's like, dude, I got nothing to lose, and I'm gonna like go kill this guy, right?
Yeah, you'd think he'd put some work in to make sure that he was ready to take on, the Greek god of war.
Exactly. And I'm just thinking further too, because this is from the storytelling perspective, right? Like, and you nailed it perfectly that so apparently this original Thor compared to Balder, it's like this is someone who looks like he can go toe to toe with the protagonist. And so I immediately recognize from a storytelling perspective that it's like that's what he represents. He represents this very interesting challenge that didn't exist before. And so that's I think kind of like the question, and maybe we'll find this out in the future, is what drove the decision making process to in effect change the story, right? Because this is also something I think that really ties into like what we're hoping to do with this continuous search for art here is these decisions are not just a matter of like checking check boxes, but like these decisions change the story, and it's sounding like this is not going to be as good of a story as it could have been.
Well, I
No,
mean,
no, it's a big problem with I can suspend my disbelief to a certain extent because they are gods, but if Bacchus looked like this, it makes sense that Bacchus would look like this because Bacchus is that kind of god, right?
Yeah, wine
But
and partying in excess. Yeah.
Thor is not that kind of god. Thor is a god that lives for battle and flies around and, brings the storm and throws Mjolnir and does all the Thor stuff. He can't do that in this state.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he makes Fat Thor from the Avengers look okay. Like Fat Thor from the Avengers probably could take this guy no problem if they were to, do a foot race.
And I was gonna say, I think so much of fighting is just like being fast on your feet. At least that's what I learned when I did boxing. So yeah, it's just it's weird. Like maybe at some point we'll have to do a special, and we'll just need to like really dig into like what are some of these creative committees deciding, because I think that's really what it comes down to for some of these. Right, we often think of game companies as just being like this homogeneous thing, but really it's you have groups of developers, you have right the story writers and content people, and you can also have other committees that sometimes have nothing to do directly with the game production, but taking it back to like what was going on with John Gibson with Tripwire, right? Like that was either somebody in HR or like there's some other committee, right? Like the trust and safety committees, or various other like let's be nice to each other kind of committees that are kind of running the show and messing with the story when when these are people who really shouldn't have that role, and sometimes don't even contribute to the company. So again, it would be interesting to see if we can pull that information out and kind of see what's going on.
yeah, I mean, clearly there's a lot of choices being made in this God of War game that aren't for.
Oh, yep, just here in the article. Known for his red hair and beard, which, like I said, that was actually a thing. Thor in mythology was a heavy drinker and a lover of feasts. While the god of thunder was also a mighty warrior, this burly design, that's not a burly design, that's a fat fuck, looks far more accurate to his lore than some gamers would like to admit. The fuck it does. But that's what they're going with. Well, he's a heavy drinker and a lover of feasts, so clearly he'd be a fat body, right?
I was gonna say, but then again, so is Jim Raynor from StarCraft. Like he was a heavy drinker in StarCraft 2: Wings of Liberty, and yet he was still ripped. Apparently he figured out how to like get around whatever his issue was.
Yeah, it's
To
called
stay in
fighting
shape.
battles all the time.
Yeah. So again, but then again, I can almost hear the committee meeting now, because I've sat at a couple of these committee meetings for different type of projects, and they're like, oh, like this is more accurate to his lore, and this is probably by someone who's probably self-inserting a little bit here. So again, we'll we'll probably dive into that further. But I think this is it's been a good episode. It's kind of interesting just to see again just the world of like just some of these gaming decisions. It's just some of the crazy that's going on out there. But again, I mean, what was good is we did find one piece of good art as we were talking about it. So what was that again? That was Battlefield 1 we were talking about.
Yeah, and I would go so far as to say if you haven't played the previous God of War, that definitely qualified. It was fucking on point, but I
So,
don't know what they're doing
yeah,
with this one.
To go over the pieces of Ascendant art that we could probably recommend after this podcast that were discussed, we had Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988. That was a really good movie.
Yep.
We have God of War, the original ones, and even the last one that came out. Great games. We have Battlefield 1, which is the World War I set Battlefield game, probably available on Steam. Or you can, if you still have a PS4, you can go out and get probably like the Game of the Year edition that has all the downloadable content.
I mean, they don't have a PS5, so.
Well, this is true. This is true. So those ones are all great. I also made a clear reference to Ghostbusters, which is a high quality film from 1984, was it? 84, 85? Still holds up very well. And I've got high hopes for the new Ghostbusters movie that will be coming out in a few weeks from when we're recording this podcast. And hopefully Joey doesn't make a bet against me on that one because I don't want to lose on that one and have it be bad. So I'm just going to go with it being good until it comes out and proves me otherwise.
Nah, I'm not going to bet you on that one because I'm hoping the same thing. And I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yes, indeed, because at some point, just like we were talking about, there is a point business-wise that either it's got to turn around or just the opportunity for new artists is just going to become too big. So, no, that was a good summary for the end of this. Definitely great conversation that we had, and I'm looking forward to talking with you guys next week.
Thanks. Good time. See you guys next week.
Awesome. Thanks.
Later.
All right. Bye-bye.